Good day to everyone. I am Samir, and I will be your moderator for today's webinar. On behalf of Beroe, I would like to welcome you all to the webinar on Need of the Hour Suppliers or Strategic Partners from Beroe Insights. In today's webinar, we will have our speakers discuss and help us understand the concept of strategic supplier relationship management and what do organizations need to know to identify if they are ready to implement SSRM. Before we move ahead with the presentation, I have some general set of instructions as always. Number one, please note all the attendees will be placed on mute. Number two, during the course of presentation, if you would like to post questions, you will find a box on the right-hand side of your screen indicated in red on the slide. Request you type your question and hit the send button. As an end, when the presentation progresses, I will note down the high-frequency questions and will pose it to the presenter at the end of the session. If by any chance you are experiencing any connection issues, request you to close the window, go back to the email, and try to connect using the same link. If there are further problems, request you to please email Puneet at puneet.ramal@beroe-inc.com. That's PUNEET.RAMAUL@beroe-inc.com, which you can also find in the email. Moving on, let me quickly introduce the speakers for today. We have Ipsita Suman. Ipsita is a senior research analyst with Beroe, specialized in tracking the procurement, performance measurement, and management category. She has worked on multiple projects for many Fortune 500 clients and has also written several thought leadership papers on topics including managing supplier risk with predictive analytics and changing dynamics in procurement, Contract Management Center of Excellence. We also have Harish. Harish is an indirect services procurement expert at Beroe and has also leads the procurement opportunities team. In over 5 years at Beroe, Harish has built extensive knowledge and expertise in strategic sourcing, category management approaches, and business performance management across various industries, including FMCG, pharmaceutical, technology, food and beverages. Let me now pass it on to the presenters.
Strategic SRM has the power to deliver spectacular benefits only if used correctly. But when should companies adopt SSRM? This is a critical question that most of the times do not get asked, and hence the effort to implement strategic SRM fails to yield results. The most important factor is that procurement teams need to be aware of when to take the SSRM route and when not to use it. Thank you, Samir. Good day, everyone. Welcome to the webinar on Need of the Hour, Suppliers or Strategic Partners. Today, we are going to discuss about the importance of strategic SRM in this dynamic procurement era. The focus of this discussion will touch upon the need for strategic SRM, to understand how companies view this as an imperative strategy to derive optimal value from the supply base. Along with that, we will explore the different procurement maturity stages that support strategic SRM practice to deliver high performance. Secondly, we would find out if a company's procurement function is ready to deploy strategic SRM, because readiness is the key. Here we are going to discuss about the importance of identifying the different stages of procurement maturity, as well as at which stages companies would find it useful to treat their supplier or a group of suppliers as strategic partners. Thirdly, we will focus on the approach to develop strategic relationships. Here we would discuss about how to identify the right strategic supplier, the prerequisite for strategic SRM, and developing a continuity plan. We will also talk about few case studies of companies who have successfully implemented strategic SRM to achieve value. we would also focus on a very prudent eye-opener case to highlight the don'ts in approaching SSRM. So before we jump into SSRM as a concept and strategy, let's have a look at the current scenario of Fortune 500 companies' strategic SRM implementation. Did you know? And what I state here is a fact that roughly about 40% of Fortune 500 companies who have implemented strategic SRM derive value, whereas the other 60% either do not reap any benefits or do not have a clarity to derive an effective SRM plan. Harish, is this because companies always look out for an off-the-shelf solution to achieve quick benefits? What is your inference on this fact?
Yes, Ipsita. This fact is surprising and thought-provoking. An unsuccessful strategic SRM doesn't necessarily mean that companies do not have a defined channel to derive the initiative. It is also depends on the level of procurement maturity and business goals associated with an organization. As a matter of fact, we need to understand the difference between SRM and strategic SRM. In SRM, the focus is on maintaining a relationship with all the suppliers, whereas strategic SRM focuses on customized relationship with each strategic supplier on a continuous basis. Generally, the common misconceptions about strategic SRM are huge investment on supplier development, time-consuming process, cultural differences, less executable ideas, so on and so forth. But when it comes to strategic SRM, companies should look for sustainable procurement practices instead of expecting a tactical output. For example, if the goal of the procurement is deriving better price from the suppliers, then SRM is not the solution. On the other hand, SRM would entitle a high focus on continuous improvement and supply management, thinking beyond cost reduction to generate value, improving competitive advantage through innovation and smart procurement. However, we should note that strategic SRM has no one solution that fits all. It is not an off-the-shelf idea. So now let's take a quick view of how procurement maturity has evolved and its corresponding view on the relationship with suppliers. As procurement matures, the supplier relationship transforms. Taking a quick glance at the maturity stages, any company can position its relationship strategy across the grid. It can be at the nascent stage where SRM principles are tried, till the stage where they can operate via key strategic account management principles. Widely, industries lie in any of these four stages based on business goals, category maturity, buying pattern, industry dynamics, etc. So to begin with, procurement will always start its journey with focus on price reduction, which stresses on leveraging volume, negotiation on margins, and optimizing spot buys. In stage 2, the company start moving away from price negotiation and enter into a phase where they start realizing the importance of knowing the cost of the goods that goes into the production. Now in stage 3, procurement team has already got hold of the current cost that goes into the production. Here the focus of the procurement shifts to finding the future cost in order to strategize for the better performance. Now collaboration comes into picture while engaging with the suppliers. This makes the companies move a step closer toward their suppliers. But at times, companies feel that collaboration is not enough with the suppliers in this fast-changing dynamic business environment, where there is an increased pressure for continuous and highly sustainable initiatives. So in stage 4, companies aim to achieve value maximization out of their key suppliers with whom they collaborate in earlier stages. Here the benefits are institutionalized and the sustainable competitive advantages established. To derive value maximization, there is a strong urge to go beyond usual collaboration and devise a strategic action plan with the key suppliers of your critical portfolio. Companies view this as a challenging phase, as this phase emphasizes to view their suppliers as not suppliers but strategic partners. And this applies across industries.
Yes, Harish. I in fact have industry numbers suggesting the stages in which most companies lie. So, let us now have a look at companies who are in different industries. This slide gives a look at where the different industries lie with regards to their procurement maturity and supplier relationship phases. In case of pharma industry, speed to market remains the major focus, leading to strategic SRM initiatives. Pharma companies have reached a phase where pricing environment continues to be more demanding. With drugs coming off patent, the critical challenge is boosting the drug pipeline and R&D productivity. Pharma companies have realized the importance of having a dedicated team for key supplier account management. In case of food and beverage industry, sustainable sourcing is viewed as a major factor, which drives companies to have a strategic relationship with their top suppliers. Innovation is viewed as a major factor in CPG industry, due to which companies aim for a strategic partnership. Technology companies have started realizing the importance of supplier cooperation and are slowly moving away from cooperation phase and entering the collaboration phase. The major factor driving this shift is the need for innovation. On the other hand, supply assurance of certain hardware components, especially semiconductors, lead to relationships turning strategic. According to our analysis, automotive companies are considered as masters in implementing strategic SRM. They have always been facing a lot of challenges, which have been making them act in a dynamic fashion. One can imagine the complexity of the supply chain, considering there are about 100,000 to 200,000 part numbers being fed every day with the lead time of few hours. Moreover, escalating cost of natural commodities such as aluminium, palladium has constantly put pressure on the procurement team. The major factor which drives these strategic SRM initiatives is service quality levels provided by especially the top tier 1 suppliers. Very less companies are in nascent stage of procurement. Most of the industries have moved beyond the price negotiation stage and realized the benefits of knowing and managing their costs. Companies, however, can still derive benefits with respective stages by gainfully engaging with their suppliers. Harish, here I'm actually curious about one thing. Do all the companies in stage 4 need to go for SSRM?
Ipsita, let me answer your question in a detailed framework. While there are a number of suppliers in stage 4, not all are required to adopt strategic SRM. Adoption depends on the company's business situation. To highlight few major drivers, one can be high switching costs, which can push companies to go into a strategic relation with the supplier. Switching costs are usually high in technological industry. Another one can be a long-term contract duration, which is the most common reason for the company to enter into a strategic partnership in order to gain maximum value from the supplier. Followed by this, it can be also a high degree of customization in products that leads to strategic partnership. There are cases when a supplier is made strategic just because there is no alternate supplier in the market. Also, a high geographical coverage or a new market support is another area which leads to the supplier being strategic. Especially in the outsourcing industry, preference is given to the suppliers who have a global footprint to be termed as strategic. In this dynamically changing world, where change is the only constant, innovation is also a key reason why companies go for strategic partnership. There are instances from automobile industries to CPG industry where supplier innovation has changed the way of working. Preferential access to scarce expertise, intellectual property and confidentiality is also another reason where companies go about in signing a strategic deal. Also, transparency, ethics, and risk minimization in regulatory compliance and sustainability are few other factors which are gaining popularity in terms of signing a strategic deal. Even sustainability has become a very important factor, especially in the sourcing process, where companies like Unilever, Johnson & Johnson, Nestle, Bacardi have already pledged sustainable sourcing by the end of this decade. Interestingly, in retail segment, there is also a close integration with the strategic suppliers to leverage co-branding and product endorsements for new ventures. So apart from these, there are few other obvious reasons like technology transfer, dedicated capacity, assuring disaster recovery, risk transfer, etc. So with these factors in mind, it becomes very clear that adoption of strategic SRM is either a matter of choice or external market pressure. And this gets really smooth and easy if you can differentiate your strategic suppliers from other key suppliers in your portfolio. But what percentage of my supply base could be strategic? Is there an ideal number or percentage of supply which have to be placed in the elite group of strategic suppliers? These are some common questions which companies have behind their mind before stepping into this stage.
Yes, Harish, I completely agree with your points, especially the questions around who should be my partner or how I can identify my partner. Here, I would like to explain this in a bit detailed framework. The representation depicts how the entire supply base could be broadly classified into 4 tiers of suppliers based upon the value achieved by the buyer and the criticality of the procured product. Tier 4 suppliers are our conditional suppliers, comprising roughly about 30% of the supply base. These are the set of suppliers which could be replaced whenever needed. The engagement with this set is purely tactical or transactional in nature. Tier 3 suppliers are the standard suppliers, which comprise roughly about 50% of the supply base. This is the major set of suppliers where most of the supply base lies. The engagement is on the lines of leveraging these suppliers with apt information exchange and performance metrics defined on yearly basis. Meetings and supplier visits happen once a year. Tier 2 suppliers are the collaborated suppliers, comprising roughly about 20% of the supply base. This set of suppliers enjoys a lot of benefits. The company works very closely with these suppliers. The major aim at this stage is mutual performance improvement, which are also defined in the KPIs. Scorecards and targets are defined and meetings take place on a semi-annual basis. The most important tier of supplier is the Tier 1 supplier category. Suppliers in this space are considered as strategic suppliers, who in general comprise roughly less than 1% of the supply base. These are the first choice of contact if the company wants to introduce a new product line. The company goals are very closely tied up with these suppliers and meetings take place minimum at a quarterly level. We are talking about a very close, rather tightly held relationship with this elite group. These are the ones who are eligible for SSRM. Again, this 1% of supply base varies based on nature of business, complexity of category portfolio, and procurement maturity. So Harish, do you think that identifying procurement maturity, realizing the drivers, and identifying eligible strategic suppliers will handhold companies to walk through a successful SSRM implementation? As I consider, these are the critical action items before a company adopts SSRM.
Ipsita, very true. I agree with your comment, but it doesn't stop there. There are cases where companies have failed because they implemented strategic SRM at the wrong stage of procurement maturity. Let me brief you with an example. This is a story about a very ambitious pharma company who got confused in identifying its goals while trying to implement strategic SRM. In declining R&D productivity, patent cliff, healthcare regulation, and rising pricing pressures across pharmaceutical industry, this global company wished to bring out new product in the market. They went forward and signed a long-term contract with a supplier who was known for innovation. And this strategic partner was an outsourcing and a key material supplier to the company. So what happened here? The company did not plan a roadmap of the engagement with the supplier. There was a lack of both long-term and short-term goals, which left the supplier unclear about their roles and responsibilities. On one hand, the top management of the company had very high expectations from the supplier. On the other hand, the internal metrics were not at all aligned with the engagement. The procurement team was still measured on the basis of cost cutting, while the supplier was pushed for innovation. At a point of time, the supplier started pitching about their new products and was deviated from the real goal. The company was in initial stages of SRM, and they did not have a defined setup for cooperating or collaborating with the supplier. Due to the differences in approach and constant cut demands, the supplier started compromising on the product quality for the existing contracts. Soon there was a major mistrust between the top management of both the organizations, and the contract was terminated on a very bitter grounds. So what went wrong in this case? Even though the company successfully identified the strategic supplier, the company was neither in the right stage nor did they involve the supplier in framing the goals. In fact, the actual goal was price reduction, even though it was stated as new product development. So what was missing in this case? A well-defined continuity plan would have saved the contract had the company realized its importance. From the case, we can see that there was no consistent process in supplier quality development or proactive initiation or incentives for innovation management. Also, there was a lack of coordination at various levels of procurement. This company, on an overwhelming mode, wanted to explore strategic SRM just because it had identified its key supplier in stage 1.
Yes, Harish. That was a real eye-opener case study. We should indeed be very clear about our goals right from the beginning. In contrast, I have come across a couple of cases where companies implemented strategic SRM only when they were in stage 4. These companies have naturally moved up the procurement maturity ladder, and because of sudden competitive pressure, were pushed to form strategic alliance with one of their key suppliers. They already had set up the stage for the strategic partnership in terms of internal procurement maturity and leveraging the supplier. The competitive pressure made them identify their strategic suppliers, and they went ahead leveraging their expertise by developing a joint goal. So coming to our first company, which belongs to the CPG industry. This is a case when the procurement function had made significant progress in moving away from a purely tactical role. The CPG major was dealing with increased competition. This was the time when they relooked into their strategies and thought of focusing on disruptive innovation that fundamentally shifts the market, product, and process. The procurement and sales departments were already in close collaboration with few major packaging suppliers to revamp the packaging. The groundwork for strategic SRM started when the company invited its top packaging suppliers to submit innovative designs for the packaging. The major parameters for consideration were ease of handling by the consumer, lower cost, container appeal, reusability, compactness of design, and ease of transportation. As part of encouraging the suppliers, the company offered a long-term strategic relationship with the best supplier and also provide additional resource to improve their R&D for the contract period. One of the suppliers came up with a highly innovative design and was converted into strategic partner. After the deal was signed, a 4-member C-level cross-functional team was established that was headed by the procurement chief of both the supplier and the buyer, which focused on idea generation and sharing. The supplier was provided a state-of-the-art R&D center at the buyer's premises to better the design and encourage further innovation. The performance measurement metrics were relooked at and realigned with both the organization's goals. In this case, the value derived was in the terms of innovation and revenue generation. With the new design in place, the overall wastage was reduced by 15%, which was perfectly in line with the buyer's long-term goal of reducing carbon footprint. The quirky packaging was a major hit in the market, as a result of which there was 10% increase in the market share. They saved $10 million over the first year. Now, moving to our next case study. This company belongs to an entirely different industry altogether. This is the story about an automotive company who was facing serious challenge in terms of rising R&D costs, intensifying competition, and weak sales. With increasing engineering costs and product development cycle, the company felt the need for continuous inputs from suppliers in terms of designing the bespoke parts. The company identified the strategic supplier from a list of 10 suppliers. This supplier has actually maximum contribution in the customization of parts. The company, through joint ventures, decided a huge push into low-cost countries and doubling of sales in emerging markets. The major focus of the company was quick introduction of a new product in the market. In this journey, a 12-member cross-functional team was set up, which was responsible and accountable for the strategic relationship. These included C-level execs from procurement, R&D, marketing, production, testing, and finance from both buyer and supplier. A war room was specifically created for brainstorming purpose. The supplier was adept in quickly transforming the designs into prototypes, which actually sped up the research process. The performance scorecard for both the companies were also aligned with the goal of product development to cancel the cultural differences in the organization. Apart from this, the team also developed strategies on a collaborative basis. So with the smooth SSRM implementation, the company achieved value maximization in terms of innovation, growth, and revenue generation. In this case, the product development cycle decreased by 2 years, leading to a whopping $5 billion savings. Both the cases which I have explored till now talk about the companies who took up SSRM out of external competitive pressure. Harish, as you mentioned earlier, companies take up SSRM as a matter of choice or compulsion. However, I have not come across a case till now where a company took up SSRM as a matter of choice and still became successful.
Ipsita, matter of compulsion depends upon many factors, especially external situation. However, there are companies who are continuously being the pioneers in this space. They are the ones who have a long-term vision and work in a step-by-step approach to achieve their goals. Let us have a look at a company who planned their strategic SRM journey well in advance and smoothly transitioned into the alliance. Please note that this company was in stage 2 of procurement maturity when they decided to drop a long-term plan. This food and beverage company operates in a tough, low-margin trading environment. This particular instance is about the late in 2000. The company was facing a lot of challenge in managing the source of a critical raw material. The company engaged with a lot of suppliers for the same raw material. There were variances in prices and quality owing to many suppliers providing the same product. Due to the perishable nature of this product, it was extremely essential that the demand planning has to be done tactfully. So as a part of the plan, the procurement team realized that there was a lot of inventory created by the sourcing from different suppliers. A team was set up which closely tracked and monitored the performance of these suppliers. Several suppliers were selected for validation and refinement of the sourcing approaches developed by the SRM team. This SRM team developed a pilot model and tested the suppliers' capabilities. The model also included the sourcing and quality guidelines the company wanted the suppliers to follow. Based on the success from the pilot, the SRM team was commissioned to design a change management plan. It included training, coaching, and developing communication practices with the aim to imbibe SRM practices and skills in the overall organization. The SRM community was launched to enable ongoing learning and sharing of SRM-related best practices across business units and clusters in various geographic regions. So by the end of first 2 years, major suppliers have been identified. And by the end of first 4 years, SRM had moved from a cooperation phase to a collaboration phase where suppliers were reduced from 12 to 3 key suppliers. And in the beginning of fifth year, the internal procurement organization was fully matured to work closely with a single supplier and develop strategic relationship. This is when the supplier who has maximum global coverage was signed for another 10 years. So what went right in this case? They had all the prerequisites done to set up a clear stage for the transition. And this didn't happen overnight. A 5-year plan comprising of critical rituals that were necessary for the commencement of SSRM were put in place. The company periodically revamped procurement performance measurement process. They also implemented robust contract management system. Along with that, they rebuilt supplier performance evaluation with the changing need. As a result, they were able to decrease the lead time by 10% and also reduce their inventory by 20% in 5 years. To give a dollar perspective, they saved $1.5 billion in 5 years. So isn't that interesting, Ipsita?
Definitely, Harish. It was interesting. Prerequisites are really important for any company before implementing SSRM. I guess we did compare both the aspects where companies pick up strategic SRM as a matter of choice or under compulsion through these case studies. I feel that there are a few interesting attributes in the cases which we explored. Let us make a quick comparison across cases to explore the common hidden mantra for a successful strategic SRM. Companies have aimed for SRM in all the phases of procurement maturity, but only those who had readied themselves for SSRM in stage 4 have found success. Let us go company by company. The pharma company was unsuccessful in its SSRM initiative because it did not have a continuous plan, as a result of which deviated from its goal. Also, the company's procurement maturity was in stage 1. This did not allow the company to have necessary tools to continue the SSRM. Let's just say the company was not ready for SSRM. The CPG and automotive company were already in the right maturity phases to take up SSRM, but they also made sure that they take into consideration the right recipe for success of SSRM, reaping the benefits. The food and beverage company, though was in stage 2, had envisaged its path for stage 4. It went on a step-by-step approach and with great patience was able to achieve its objectives, simultaneously readying its procurement organization. So here we should understand the fact that market pressure as well as new revenue maximization opportunities propel these companies to execute strategic SRM. Moving forward, across these cases, one entity which remains intact is the word continuous. The critical factors that the successful companies adopted SSRM had a continuous flavor in their approach while residing in stage 4. The companies established a cross-functional governance team. These teams were the major drivers for the SSRM program. Having them working closely and continuously engaging with each other ensured that strategies were exchanged in a collaborative manner. They developed unique scorecards for each strategic supplier. Since each SSRM program is unique and has its own nuances, unique scorecard eliminates differences in human resource review schedules, inconsistent measures that might arise due to differences in organization culture for both the companies. The changing dynamics of the goals were continuously brought about in the scorecard to ensure that short-term and long-term goals were met conveniently. This actually ensures that there is enough motivation to take the SSRM program in a smooth manner. They also implemented continuous performance evaluation and reporting. Most of the SSRM program is broken down to short-term goals as well as long-term goals. Hence, evaluating the performance and reporting in a continuous fashion after each milestone gives enough time to look back in case of any deviation and helps avoiding unnecessary time overruns.
Exactly, Ipsita. That is one of the key learning points which I would like to summarize for the day. So let's have a quick recap of what we learned out of this discussion. Procurement has traveled a long way from negotiating price to deriving value. With the changing dynamics, it's best to relook into one's procurement goals and align supplier relationships accordingly. So as a first step, it is important for a company to realize what stage of procurement maturity they belong to. One should be cognizant of the fact that they should not implement strategic SRM at the wrong stage like the pharmaceutical case study discussed earlier. It is also equally important to understand the driver for trying your hands on strategic SRM. As quoted earlier, it can be either a matter of choice or compulsion due to external competitive pressure. Once you are eligible and clear with your motives for partnering, it is necessary to identify who should be your strategic supplier. And let's also not forget the fact that strategic supplier is a subset of your key suppliers with whom you collaborate in stage 3. Followed by this, as a critical step, one should align internal procurement objectives and KPIs with that of strategic partners. As discussed in the successful cases, measuring and benchmarking procurement performance process, building robust contract management and supplier performance system sets up a stronger foundation for a sustainable relationship. And finally, a continuous plan involving a consistent process, proactive initiation for innovation, and a coordinated process at various levels of procurement will ensure that this strategic partnership remains robust. Having left no stone unturned, a procurement organization will reap maximum value out of its partners in the form of high speed to market, continuous innovation, a high degree of process improvement, increased supplier control, an assured supply, and finally, definitely a high revenue generation. So in conclusion, we should accept that across industry there is an increased shift in focus from managing cost to raising value. However, for companies that are not in stage 4, traditional cost saving methods and COGS impact remains very important. In market competitiveness and raising strategic value, it is important to judge where our critical categories belong to and position our engagements accordingly. Of course, let's remember that the traditional cost savings methods continue to remain a critical action item for any supplier engagement. However, maximum value can be achieved only on certain strategic relationships that can lead to a better business growth, de-risking your supply chain, and achieving value chain optimization. Hence, I would suggest implement strategic SRM only when you have identified that you are genuinely ready for it. Now with that, I would like to hand over the presentation to Samir. We will be glad to address any questions with regards to the presentation. Samir, over to you.
That was an insightful discussion. Now I get the importance of realizing whether the procurement teams travel together with organizations' goals and motives. The case files clearly explain the do's and don'ts that an organization should consider before implementing strategic SRM. Also, there was a clear attribute on being continuous with your key suppliers to derive value maximization as pointed out in the discussion. Now, what we're going to do is we're going to take some high frequency questions that we've received during the presentation. The first question that we've received is, according to the presentation, I feel we are in the third stage of procurement maturity. We already have a reward program in place for our key suppliers and are quite happy with the way things are. I really do not see a need to have a very close relationship with the key supplier. Am I missing out on something here? Harish?
Samir, interesting question. I'm sure many of the listeners would be having doubts on similar lines. As we quoted in the discussion, strategic SRM is completely a matter of choice or compulsion. The decision to implement strategic SRM depends upon a lot of internal as well as external factors. The major reason for the success of strategic SRM is a commitment from the steering committee, which is led by the top management. The top management must be very clear with the organization vision before actually going for strategic SRM. If you have any concerns about strategic SRM or you think that is not necessary at this stage, then our suggestion is that do not rush into strategic SRM, literally. There are many Fortune 500 companies who are reaping excellent benefits out of supplier collaboration. So implement strategic SRM only when you are fully convinced about it.
All right. We received another question during today's webinar, and the question is, in my opinion, sharing strategies with supplier would invite a lot of risk with regards to leakage of ideas. What are the risks associated with implementing strategic SRM plan? How can I mitigate the risks?
This is a very debatable question. In the course of our research, we came across a lot of stakeholders who share the same thought. Risk in SSRM would arise only if the groundwork, in other words, the prerequisites, as we mentioned in the presentation, are taken care of. Strategic SRM is not a one-step approach, but a continuous approach. So before reaching the strategic SRM phase, one must have had collaborated with the particular supplier with whom some degree of strategy sharing would have already been done. A mutual trust is the oxygen on any strategic relationship that thrives between the supplier and the buyer. If that is present right from the beginning, along with the continuous strategies, risk would eliminate. Also, a lot depends upon how exactly the relationship is taken forward. As we have mentioned, each strategic relation is unique in nature and it is difficult to provide a standard off-the-shelf solution.
All right. That wraps up today's webinar. I'd like to thank everyone for joining us. In case anyone has any questions, you have our email address. Please drop us an email, a note, and we'll be more than happy to respond to it. Thank you everyone once again for joining us. Have a great day.